And it looks like we're very close to critical mass. Let's give about another 35, 40 seconds, not a full minute, but we'll give them about 35, 40 seconds to get here. They're caught in the hallway. You know, the elevator's not moving quickly, trying to get some water at the drinking fountain before they head in. The usual. Jemana, how are you doing?
All right.
That's what I'm talking about. I like that. I like that. Just very solid. I'm all right. Okay. All righty. So here's what we'll do. We'll get started. And as we kick this meeting off, well, welcome to the, what is today? Today is May 4th. Oh my gosh. Welcome to the May 4th installment of the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force in Takoma Park, Maryland. So excited to be here with everyone. Thank you all for your time and your participation. We have a packed agenda today. We are going to jump right into talking about the listening session. We're going to debrief that, pull out the high thoughts that we heard, and if there are any key points that we want to reflect on. Then we're going to jump into a conversation with Chief Duvall, and followed by a question and answer portion. Following that, we will have a budget overview from our city manager, Ms. Ludlow, followed by a question and answer overview. And then we'll close out the meeting today. Michael's going to lead us through a dynamic discussion around timeline, and so we can have some planning around the weeks to come. But I realized that we did our listening session on Thursday and we did our meeting last week, and we didn't take some time for us to come together as a group. So really quickly, let's zip through. I'm going to put you all on the spot. I want you all to share one exciting thing. It could be from any space of your life, professional, civic, personal, whatever it may be, that you're willing to share or wanting to share. And you have 10 seconds to do so. So I want you all to share one exciting thing that's going on in your life. Michael, you're the first person I see on my screen. So you're our sacrificial lamb here. You're up first.
Sure. So I'm looking forward to a Dynasty Startup Fantasy Football Draft that starts on May 8th. It's like 8 hours a pick, so it's going to take weeks and weeks to get through. So doing that.
That's exciting. That's really exciting. Adam, you're up next.
Oh boy, I didn't have much time to think. I think in the last week, the most exciting thing that has happened is that I solved a case at work. And I probably can't say much more than that, which is very self-aggrandizing sounding. So it's not as big a deal as it sounds like, but it was big for me.
Well, we know what line of work you're in, so we'll take that as a win. That's good. Thank you for sharing with us. Lauren, it's your turn.
So an exciting thing is that my son finished all of his requirements for Cub Scout, so he's graduating and he's crossing over to Troop 33 in the Boy Scouts. So we're excited for him.
That's amazing. Congratulations to your son. G-Day.
Yes, hi. Sadly, I've been bogged down with work, so I don't necessarily know that there's any one big thing. I've done some planting recently, or trying to do planting, and basically lots of home improvement.
There you go. That's a win. That's a win. Thank you for sharing. All right, Dwayne Scott.
Hey folks, how's it going? I would say probably the most exciting thing that's happened to me this past week is I finished my garden fencing project. So goodbye to the mole that has been invading and eating my lettuce. And hello to hopefully some healthy veggies growing this coming into this summer.
That's what I'm talking about right there. That's what I'm gonna have to come pick some. That's great. That's great. Jemana.
I grow nothing, but the kids on our end of the neighborhood have been having a weekly bake sale to raise money for the Movement for Black Lives. Talisha has been a frequent visitor, as has Mayor Stewart. We crossed over, so they've shifted their goals. Started last summer with a goal of $1,000, and they bumped it to $5,000. We're now at $8,500 because they shifted their goal to $10,000. So if you all feel the need for sugary treats, we're usually out there on a Saturday between 1:30 to 3 on the corner of Merwood and Wildwood. It is always delicious.
Well,
and for a good cause.
That's amazing. If you share, if they have a square or a place where they're accepting donations outside of cash, send it around via email. I would be happy to support the young bucks.
I could do that. Well, actually, one of the other parents, one of the two of us makes the donations. He does PayPal, whatever, one of those. Venmo,
please.
Venmo.
Yeah,
So
there you
I'll
go.
get that. I'll get that out to y'all.
Perfect. Send something
But
around.
you should also come through and eat delicious treats.
Very true too. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with that.
Kids are
Kiminori.
very good salespeople.
I'm really excited now. Kiminori.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that exciting. I guess people who work on like, grants and proposals, I've been stuck on like several projects and because all the paperwork and legal stuff and some of that got cleared. So, boring, but the milestones, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Right. You're utilizing your trade. That's what I'm talking about. Ajamel.
Hey everybody, I'm going to be the Debbie Downer. I think this is just a dark, busy period for me. So I'm in deposition prep for tomorrow. So, yay. Sorry.
Well, good luck with everything that you're working on, and we know what line of work you're in too. So you're doing the work, the people's work. So thank you for all that you're focusing on. Cedric.
I've just got in, so I don't even know what the question is or whatever.
Oh, you 10 seconds to share something exciting that's happening or a positive moment that's happening in your professional, personal, or civic life.
Oh God, man, something positive. Well, just being alive and being grateful for that, that's the blessing in itself. When you look at everybody has COVID, but in my professional life, we're just busy. But the school system is trying to wind down and I have to put plans together for all the graduations, and then also how we're going to keep the interim superintendent, how we're going to keep her safe. So I'm working plans on that because she'll be traveling from school to school. So we have to put together a plan for that. So I'm busy.
That's amazing. Thank you for what you do. My mother is a school board president, and when she travels around school, she has security and detail, and it's a really interesting process. I've learned about it.
Yeah. We have to have detail all the time, because things have just gotten crazier. So we're working on that. But other than that, hey,
that's good to hear. Any day that you're beating, bleaking, and breathing, you're good to go. So I'll take
that one right.
Sawa.
Hi, I'm still driving, but yeah, exciting thing. I just got into the University of Maryland School of Public Policy, so I'm kind of excited.
Congratulations.
Thanks, and that's it.
Congratulations. All right, we're going to do a rapid round. Susie, you're up.
For me too? Oh,
Yeah,
I just learned that the church that was my father's first church got transferred to the Nez Perce Indians, and I'm really excited.
That's really cool. That is really exciting. Chief.
I had a wonderful day on Sunday. Won their state championship.
Congratulations. Congratulations. And Councilwoman, wrap us up.
Well, I have been trying to get a permit for a shed in my backyard from Montgomery County, and it has finally been approved. Yay! That was months in the making.
That is a prime example right there that even as an elected official, you are an everyday citizen as well, and you have to go through the process. That's what I'm talking about. All right. Oh, Chris, you just joined us. So you're being put on the spot. 10 seconds, something positive that is happening in your professional, personal, civic life. And go.
I actually heard the last 6 people. I was like here invisibly. I'm not sure what was happening. But my exciting thing is I booked a little bit of vacation for the summer. So I'm going to travel a little bit. And it's just something to look forward to. And it's lifted my spirits. So.
All righty. I love that. I love that. And Cordell and Jamal and Michael, when you share today, you all have to lead your portion of the agenda with your positive advice. All right. So to keep us on time, because we can sit talking about all the great things that are happening in our life, but we have a task force to get to. As I mentioned, we have a packed agenda today. We're going to jump right into it. At our last Tuesday meeting, we had the subcommittee. We talked about the subcommittee breakouts. We had Ms. Grace Wiggins join us. She gave us a great overview of community development and everything that is happening from the housing perspective in Takoma Park. We had 6 incredible subject matter experts to join us. Mayor Stewart, Councilwoman Sissy, City Manager Susie Ludlow, Deputy City Manager Jessica Cedric, I'm gonna put you on mute. Deputy City Manager Jessica Clark, Miss Grace Wiggins, and then Captain Dan Fishcorn. And Dan Powers, you're going to have to share your note a little bit later when you speak as well. If you're looking for the review of this, that meeting from last Tuesday, Jamal, can you drop that link into the chat box so folks can have it, and you can definitely go over that. One thing to note is that we have been receiving email traffic and we compiled all the comments from the listening session. And so you received that via email earlier. It's 22 pages of the comments that we've received via the public comment channels. And we take some time, review that, digest that. And if you have any questions, feel free to surface that via email. Or we can raise it at the next meeting or bring it up this meeting if you have some comments that you would like to bring up or discuss. And at this point, I'm going to jump right into us talking about the listening session. We had a dynamic listening session. If I remember the stats correctly, we had over 30 people join us on Thursday, where folks had the opportunity to provide their comments and their feedback and their thoughts on public safety in Takoma Park, and their thoughts on the process where we are to date, excuse me. But I want to turn it over to you all to see if there was any points that stood out to you all, or if there's anything that you would like to reflect upon from the listening session.
I can go first.
Please.
Real quick, I thought the listening session was valuable and it was good. I think I would have really liked to have this before we got started, because then you have an idea of what the people are asking for and what the constituents of Takoma Park are needed, and would help us to be able to move forward and then look at certain particular aspects of whatever the community wants us to look at. And so it's almost like, now in the beginning, to me, we had to read the community's mind to figure out, other than ourselves and putting our own individual ideas out there, we wanted to get ideas from the community. That helped a lot. And I wish we'd have done that in the beginning, maybe done a few of those, then it would help moving forward to be able to know what to work on.
Thank you for that, Cedric. That's great feedback. Anybody else have any thoughts or observations from the listening session? Jemana or Michael, go right ahead.
You want to go, Jemana?
No, I was just a +1 to what Cedric said.
Wonderful.
Okay, then quickly, the only thing I would add is it would have been nice to see the people's faces, because I know in public hearings that city council does, you see them. And I think that, would be my suggestion for future listening sessions of this type, that, when they have to be on Zoom, that we see people, not just hear them. That's all.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Michael. Any other thoughts, reflections, observations?
I guess this is a sort of a thought that I keep having, but I know that there's like a place to click online where you can put comments, and there's these online Zooms, but what is for people who don't have the easy online access, or maybe even the language access, what is the way for them to be, giving thoughts or contributing their ideas?
So two quick points on that, Jemana. There are a few different ways we're able to get folks in. There are a few different ways we already have. And then there's tell us what else we need to be doing, because we can do that. There were a couple of folks who reached out after the meeting and said they were having trouble coming off mute or figuring out how to drop a question in the chat box. So we set up time to talk to those individuals one-on-one, capture their feedback, and that's in the reports that we sent your way. We also took everyone who applied to be a task force member, but who was not selected to be a task force member, and we've reached out to offer to focus group that group of individuals to make sure the feedback from their communities is getting into the process. We're hoping to get that set up within this week or early next week. And again, we'll provide a written format there, and we can do more of that. So if you think there are groups that we're just not reaching yet, please suggest what those groups might be, and we can make sure there's that one-on-one, let's get on the phone and talk it through if a community meeting's not the right format.
So then that gives me then two thoughts. One is, what does the focus group look like when you say you're going to focus group the people who like applied but weren't on?
Yep.
And my next thought is like, I just know where I live, but like, I know for the folks who live in New Hampshire across the street, like the tenants are really organized, not necessarily in like the online way. And I think that other, buildings are as well. And so to the extent that there can be outreach to those sort of community leaders to talk to them about, do they want, or can we have a way in which, they can, I don't know, whatever, however they want to do it, right? Consolidate a community,
Right.
get together community meeting, consolidate comments, something like that. And then my other thought would be to also talk to community groups. And this is something I'd said before, whether it's someone like CASA or somebody else, people who could work in particular with immigrant communities that again have language access issues where they can, work to get those comments. I think that would be super helpful.
Absolutely. So yes to all of that. To the format of the focus group, it's very similar to the focus groups we did at the beginning of this, and we sent the stakeholder audit reports around. It's a series of questions that starts with, what is your definition of public safety, to get as specific as possible on the types of recommendations you'd like to see the task force considering. We usually set them up for about 60 minutes, 60, so about 1 hour in time, depending on the size of the group, and it would be handled through Zoom. But we'll make sure we keep you posted as that comes together.
Yeah, so then that goes back to my original question, which is people who don't have the technical know-how or access to do Zoom or online comments. And that would be the other piece of it.
If there are residents that that are out there, so I've had a conversation over the last week with individuals that haven't that had technical access, technical difficulties. So if there are folks that that are out there that are looking to engage, provide us with their contact so that we can reach out to them. We can do so, and then we can make sure that we're doing everything that we can to reach them and meet them where they are, so it's not of difficulty.
Right. And I would just make one more addition to that. I agree with that, and definitely want to open the floor back up. But I think one of the things that we were doing when we were doing stakeholder audits in the early on, some of those tenants we did do phone calls with, and some of the things that they explicitly said was, we don't want our name attached to any of what we're about to say, which is why I think please reference that stakeholder audit report that we uploaded to the folder. To kind of get a sense of what some of those folks were saying, especially the folks who didn't want their names attached for public view or anything like that. So I'll toss it back over to Jevin though, for sure.
Thanks, Jamal. But I'll pick up right where you left off. Are there any other thoughts or comments? Adam, please.
Yeah, just building off of what Jamal said, and this might be in the materials that you uploaded to the folder. I haven't had a chance to look at them yet, but I think one of my concerns is that when we do these listening sessions, we might not be getting a very representative sample of the community, and 30 people is not very many in a town of 17 or 18,000. And we might benefit from some deeper explanation of what these stakeholder audits consisted of and whether that was kind of a representative sample. Because I think when you open up these listening sessions, you're probably missing out on hearing from a whole range of people, from those who don't think anything is wrong with public safety, so they're not going to show up, to those people who are so distrusting of city government that they wouldn't show up to talk either. So I think we want to capture all of that.
Absolutely, Adam. And the one other thing I'll add, and we talked about this way back at the beginning, in all of your roles as task force members, really seeing yourself as those ambassadors that's taking information about the process out, and also very importantly, bringing external information back in. So if there are groups or individuals that you're speaking with that are sharing information, get that to us and we'll make sure we're sharing it with the full task force the same way as well. We'll certainly double down on this effort, but we don't want it only to be dependent on us. So if you have groups you're automatically talking to, if you need information, if you want us to set up Zoom formats for you to engage with folks that are naturally part of your constituent group, we can also do that in addition to all the stuff that we'll make sure we get done. So just let Jevin and Jamal specifically know if there's anything like that that would be helpful, and we'll make sure we get that moving as well. I know no one had a chance to read the feedback yet because it came in late this afternoon, but in addition to the very large report of the listening session, there were 22 pages of other community feedback that's come in through the public online forum, etc. So there's voluminous information coming in now, and we're going to be packaging that in real time and sending it back out to the task force so that you're able to see it. Go ahead, Jevin.
Yep. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Adam, for your question. Any other comments, thoughts? Yep, Councilwoman.
So one thing to keep in mind, if what the task force wants to do is connect with residents in some of the multifamily buildings, I will say that many of them are connected via Zoom. They've mastered the art and they're doing some of their tenant association meetings via Zoom. So they may connect via phone or through web as well. But it's often really helpful for us to try to make sure that we would combine this with perhaps another meeting. So there's a lot of work that goes into having tenants attend tenant association meetings. There's flyers that go out. There's a lot of things that go out to make sure that folks participate. So if what it is we want to do is to reach out to some of those tenant associations, we would want to make sure that we're kind of piggybacking on some of those meetings that are already established. So it probably would have to be a shorter format than what we had before. And it would typically be alongside, maybe they're doing other meetings around other purposes and kind of trying to do double duty in that way. If that's something that it sounds like folks are interested in, I know Grace was not able to participate today, but I can definitely follow up with her and we can kind of see whether or not there's some upcoming tenant association meetings that might make sense to try to add this onto.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ashmo.
Hey, y'all. Thanks to everybody for their hard work. Really, really appreciate it. I think that I think what really came through to me from the meeting was how super informed everybody is, and that I think this is a super informed group that we have on the line here, but the public is extremely informed as well. And I think that the level of information that they come to the meeting with should shape, I think, how we structure the meeting. And so I think because the public, I think, comes to our meeting with so much information and has been tracking what we've been doing so closely, I think it may be possible for us to sort of get into the substance of what they want to talk about more quickly, as opposed to sort of us repeating things that they may not already know. And I think, again, that's reflective of the fact that the people who are attending these meetings are so deeply involved and so deeply informed, and we should be respectful of that.
Thank you, Ashmo. Are there any other thoughts, comments, reflections? Kiminori.
Yes, thanks for I think the link to the stakeholder audits. Was this available also in the resource folder already from the beginning, or this is just came on?
I'm sorry, was that the stakeholder report?
Yes.
Yep, it was available there. We also emailed it over to you all about 2.5 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. And this is the same as the focus groups that you had, or this is separate?
So yes, it is the same, but we're also doing additional focus groups that Michael mentioned a minute ago. We're going to do additional focus groups next week with some folks who couldn't make it, but also some of the folks who weren't selected to be a part of the task force, to continue doing very similar in structure to what we did before, and capturing those themes and what they want the task force to focus on.
Okay.
I'll also throw out there, and this, we can discuss this offline if it's helpful, but if anyone is interested in sitting in on those focus groups, but what we don't want to do is make anyone feel like they're in a fishbowl. So we certainly wouldn't want a lot of people, but if like a rep from each subcommittee wanted to sit in and kind of be part of it in real time, super open to that. We can also just provide the written report afterwards because we know you're already committing a lot of time. But if there's any specific interest, just let us know and we'll work with you around the scheduling.
Wonderful. Any final thoughts and comments on this before we jump into our next section? All righty then. Thank you all for your thoughts and your reflections. Now I'm going to pass it over to Chief Tony Duvall, and he's going to walk us through updated police data. Chief, the floor is yours.
Absolutely, thank you. If we could just pull up the PowerPoint, please. Thank you. As you know, we presented all of our traffic data for the last 6 years a few weeks ago. And now what we're doing tonight is presenting all of our arrest data from 2015 to 2020. So I'm going to start out by just kind of giving an overview of how we collected the data and what we collected. Next slide, please. In an overview, the data includes two types of arrests made by Takoma Park officers, and that's criminal citations and arrests and traffic stops that led to arrest. The criminal and traffic stops that led, traffic offenses that led to these arrests were varied, and we'll go into that in detail about what those offenses are in the data. Between 2015 and 2020, the City of Takoma Park Police Department had 1,911 recorded encounters in which officers arrested someone or issued them a criminal citation in lieu of arrest. Next slide, please. The background on the data, the police department prepared these data sets by reviewing all reports involving arrests from 2015 to 2020. This was a very labor-intensive process, but one that we wanted to give you the most accurate overview and comprehensive overview of arrests made by our police department. We also reviewed judicial records associated with these arrests. The police department participates in the Uniform Crime Reporting Program, which is a national program maintained by the FBI. It collects standardized data from local police departments around the country and we've reported UCR data in our annual reports through 2020. Next slide, please. Comparing UCR and the data set prepared by the police department shows some differences. And UCR is much different than actual data. So there's difference in types of arrests that are reported as part of UCR. For example, warrant service arrests for cities other than Takoma Park and traffic arrests other than DUIs are not reported to UCR, but included in that data set. But on the flip side, we've also changed how we report marijuana citations to UCR. Prior to 2018, the department did not report civil citations as part of UCR. Civil citations in the state of Maryland are not criminal arrests. No one is arrested, it's a civil offense. But UCR still requires us to report a civil citation for marijuana as an arrest. It is not an arrest. No one is physically taken in custody. It is a fine that you can pay. It's no different than getting another civil citation. Next slide, please. The data is organized into three sections: an overall analysis of data on criminal and traffic arrests, a race disintegrated analysis of criminal and traffic arrests, and a race disintegrated analysis of criminal and traffic arrests of Takoma Park residents. This includes population data from the census 2015 to 2019 American Community Survey. Next slide, please. Overall, total arrests have declined significantly since 2015, both criminal and traffic arrests. Residents of Takoma Park represent 18.8% of criminal arrests and 8.4% of all traffic arrests. Among Takoma Park residents, 55% of the police arrests were of residents of Ward 5 and Ward 6. Just a note, Ward 5 and Ward 6 accounted for 47% of serious crime reported to Takoma Park in 2020. Based on officer coding of how arrests were initiated, 66.8% of criminal arrests were public initiated, meaning we received the call for service and responded out. 63.9% of traffic arrests were officer initiated. That would mean the officer initiated the traffic stop on the vehicle. The share of officer initiated arrests and criminal arrests has declined since 2015. Next slide, please. Some of the key findings, by specific type, the most common arrests were full custody arrests. That's where we actually put handcuffs on people and transported them to the station and processed them. That represented 39.8% of criminal arrests and 68.3% of traffic arrests. Warrant service arrests were the second most common, followed by criminal citation. Warrant service arrests are when we come across an individual that may have an outstanding warrant, whether it be through our own agency or other agencies, and we are required to take them into custody and process them for that warrant. A criminal citation is issued to an individual in lieu of arrest. So we write them a citation on the scene, we give that to them, they promise to report to court for that citation. Criminal offenses were fairly evenly distributed, with the most common for warrant service at 1.9%, and disorderly conduct offenses at 10.1%. 40.6% of the traffic offenses were DUI offenses, that's driving while intoxicated, and 22.6 were for warrant services. That means we stopped someone on a traffic stop and they had an outstanding warrant. The rest were more evenly distributed. Next slide, please. By race, Black people represented 52.7% of all arrests made by the Takoma Park Police. Hispanic people were 33.6%, and white people were 13.3%. Arrests of all races have declined over time, although relative differences by race and arrest rates remain. Difference in arrest rates by race are relatively unchanged for Takoma Park residents, although relative differences by race and arrest remain within Takoma Park residents. Next slide, please. The possible reasons for the decreases in arrest, and they're consistent with what we did with our with our traffic enforcement. We refocused our criminal enforcement on serious offenses, whether they be quality of life crimes, burglaries, robberies, auto thefts, theft from autos, domestic violence, etc. We felt that was much more important to target in on those offenses and come away from the disorderly conduct, the trespassing, all of the things that we felt disproportionately targeted people of color and really did not have any quality of life impacts on the city of Takoma Park. So you may ask, okay, well, that refocus, did that have an impact on crime? Overall, crime has decreased by 14%, and that's UCR reporting from 2015 to 2020. We did have an increase last year that most agencies saw that with COVID-related crime increase. As I spoke about with the traffic data, we revamped our evaluation and reward system to focus on community engagement and problem solving over criminal and traffic enforcement. This led officers not feel pressure to make low-level, non-public safety related arrests. Like I say, we promote quality, not quantity. And you'll see that in some of the statistics we have by the overall percentages of our focus on violent crime as opposed to lesser offenses. Next slide, please. And this just give you an example of the proportion of arrests made. Since 2015, Part 1 property and violent crimes have increased over, our arrests have increased over 200%. Let me say that again. Serious crimes, property and violent offenses, arrests have increased over 200% since 2015 to 2020. That's directly related to the focus that we have on serious crime. While Part 2 crimes, which are less serious crimes, vice and nuisance offenses, have decreased 70% and 17% respectively over that same time period. And this definitely exemplifies the change in focus from minor to more serious offenses. Next slide, please. So what did we analyze? The analysis was conducted on the following data sets: arrest overall by gender, age, residency, initiation, type of arrest, type specific, and by offense. Next slide, please. The data analysis also talked about officer data related to arrest, specific officers that we have, and they were not identified. They were identified by number and how their arrest related to the race of the subjects being arrested. We also did a deep dive into race as it was related to our arrest, and it involved reviewing race, race and type, race and gender, age and race, age, gender, and race, initiation and race. When I say initiation, what was the reason for the arrest? Specific type and race, offense and race, and officer and race. It was really important for us to get all of this information, and as Mr. Powers prepared with the traffic interactive webpage, you're going to have the same thing here, and he'll go over that at the end. But any information that you want to delve into is in this information. Next slide, please. We also wanted to look at Takoma Park residents specifically. So we did the analysis on race and gender, and by ward. Like I say, this is just a Reader's Digest overview of the comprehensive nature of the data that we're providing you. We felt it was extremely important that we give the accurate data. Normally departments report UCR, and that's what we've been reporting in our annual report, but what we wanted to give you was the most actual number of people that were arrested by Takoma Park police officers between 2015 and 2020. And that's what the hand search did. So we feel confident that moving forward, we have systems in place that we will be able to capture this data on an annual basis, so it will not be as labor intensive as having to go back and hand search reports. But kudos to staff who did it. It took a long time to do, but we have data that you can crunch and analyze. And with that, I will open it up to questions from the task force. Actually, let me transition over. Mr. Powers is on the call, and he can give you a kind of a brief tutorial on the interactive web page, similar to what he did with the traffic web page. I'll turn it over to him before we ask questions.
Thanks, Chief. Would it be possible to enable screen sharing?
Absolutely. One moment. Team, I'm having some trouble. I might need assistance. Moment.
And you should have access now.
Okay, great, thanks. So as with the traffic stops webpage, the content of the report is also present as a interactive webpage that you'll be provided a link to with the same username and login as the traffic stops webpage. And I'll just go over briefly the features of the interactive webpage again, in case some of them were forgotten from the traffic stops webpage, and show some examples of that. So first, you'll see at the top interactive table of contents. You can both read the report sort of linearly, just scrolling down and seeing all of the data or the content of the report on the web page, or if you go to the top, you can click on a specific type of analysis you're interested in. So if you're interested in residency, you can click that and you'll see the stuff on residency there and the graphs related to it. If you wanted to get back to the top, you can just hit the back button and then go to a different section if you're interested in that. Then to just review some of the interactive features, just as a reminder, if you scroll over any of the values in the charts, they'll show the actual values. So here you'll see 1495 as in 1495 criminal arrests being made here, traffic 416, and then the percentages they represent. The legends of the charts also allow you to select them on and off. So if I just wanted to see trends in traffic in this graph, I could click on crime and it would hide that. To see a specific category and hide all the other categories, you can double click on an item in the legend. So if I wanted to just see arrests of people aged 18 to 29, I can double click on that. And then that can help in trying to make comparisons between different groups, because then you can click on another group, for example, people arrested aged 40 to 49, it'll show sort of direct comparison here. And to go back to show all of the groups, you can just double click on it again and it'll bring things back to the start. Then some of the interactive features of the graphs include allowing you to compare data. So if you click on this button in the top right, and then I highlight over this graph, it'll show all of the values associated with each age group right next to the bars. And here it'll show the same thing. And this can function differently for different graphs. So if I scroll down and find a scatter plot graph, and then click on compare data on hover, it'll show all of the values for 2020. If I scroll over 2020, or if I scroll over 2017, it'll show all the values for 2017. Some other features include toggle spike lines, which just shows the specific point on the graph where individual values are located. Reset axes, which resets things, and same for auto scale. Zooming in, which can be useful to get a better sense of specific differences because the legend or the axis adjusts to that. And then you can zoom out by clicking on the auto scale button. Box select, which allows you to highlight specific values, sort of de-shade others. I think it works better on this type of graph, or actually to zoom in the area of the box. Lasso select, which does a similar thing but allows you to draw sort of the shapes that you want highlighted for more direct types of comparison. And then pan, which allows you to drag the axis. This probably wouldn't be too useful, but is still a feature of the graph. And then finally, a button to download the plot as an image. So let's say I just wanted to see public highlighted and officer and public for these types of arrests. I can just download the image and it'll appear in the same form as you've sort of modified it. So some instances where
any thoughts for dinner?
This type of thing could be useful is in looking at some of the more involved graphs. Like as you'll see, there are a lot of offenses. If you wanted to compare specific types of offenses, you could double click on aggravated assault, burglary, and assault, and it'll generate graphs comparing directly these types of offenses. Also as a reminder, if you sometimes there's additional text accompanying the graph when you highlight over it. So for instance, there's information on the employment status of officers, their years of service, and their race if you highlight over officers in the anonymized officer data section. So I think that covers most of the interactive features, but I guess if there are any questions about that, happy to try to address that.
Great, we're going to jump into questions. Gina, go ahead.
Are the numbers that correspond for the anonymized officers the same from the traffic data to this current subset of data?
Are you saying that officer number one on this data match officer number one on the other data?
Yes.
It's a question Mr. Powers would have to answer on that.
They don't. It would be possible, I think, to try to line those up. And I could look into that, but right now they're separate.
I really want to respect the privacy of my staff, and to be honest with you, some of the way that we're revealing this with your service and you know racial background could identify staff. So we really need to be very careful about not doing that. So I would kind of not want to match those two in if that's possible. If you understand what I mean, we're trying to give you the data without identifying individual staff members.
Gina, your hand was still raised. You're good. Cool. Christina?
I do have other questions, but I'll wait.
I was just gonna follow up on what Chief Duvall just said, which is that by looking at someone's traffic data and their criminal arrest data wouldn't necessarily provide us demographic data, right? Like you're just trying to correlate if there's, you're just looking for, I mean, with data, like you're just looking for relationships. That's all I would offer in response to what you just said. I understand protecting for sure. In terms of like people's privacy, I just think that I'm not thinking of it the way you are.
I say that because if you click on the data, you can see the years of
Okay.
and the race of the individual officer. We only have 43 officers, so that's why I say that. I would have no problem if it didn't have those identifying race and years of service. I absolutely do the comparison, but because it does have the race and years of service, it's not hard to kind of put together and figure out who the officer is possibly.
Okay.
Thank you, Christina. Jumana?
Thank you both for those presentations. I just had a couple questions, Chief Duval, some of the things you said. So I'm just going to run through them. There are things that occurred to me as you were talking. One is you said that you focus on sort of the quality of arrest, not quantity, which of course has historically been an issue with some police forces where they sort of feel like they have quotas to fill. So how do you evaluate officers and how do you communicate to them, right? Because my assumption is, and what you said, that is not based on, you made these many stops, these many arrests, you wrote this many tickets. So that's one question. The second question I had is you were talking about how this sort of shift towards focusing on, I'm going to forget how you said it, but the more serious crimes, right? The quality, I guess, of arrests versus quantity. There was like a 200% increase in arrests in some types of, I think it was property crimes or something like that. And so my question is that just a function of how crime is moving, or is it an indication that previously officers were focused on, less serious things and maybe missing the more serious things? And then the last question is, as you're sort of—
Those two I'm not going to remember. Can I take those two and then go to the last one?
Sure.
Is that possible?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think these two are related. When I first got here, there was an evaluation and reward system that evaluated the number of citations and arrests made by officers. That's how they were evaluated and rewarded. We completely eliminated that, and we wanted people to focus more on community engagement and addressing serious crime issues. So number one, changing the evaluation system so people did not feel obligated to go out and write the loitering tickets, do the traffic enforcement that wasn't impactful, or make arrests that were not impactful. It's because we had a lot of our young folks that were just being stopped for minor offenses, whether it be minor possession of marijuana, whether it be loitering, whether it be disorderly conduct, these offenses that really disproportionately were affecting our young people of color. So that's the first thing we did. The second thing we did is we worked robustly with our crime analysts to put our officers in areas where we were having problems, where we've had previous robberies, where we've had previous burglaries, all of those things. So instead of just doing random driving around the city looking for things, we put officers in problem areas to address specific problems. And that wasn't just based on happenstance, that was based off of the data that we were able to collect on a daily and continuous basis. The 200% increase was in part one crimes. Those are serious crimes, carjackings, robberies, burglaries, things like that. Those were the serious crimes when I talked about that we focused on, as opposed to the lesser crimes, the disorderly conduct, the marijuana possession, and so on and so forth. So, it is about using technology to analyze data. That's really important. But I don't think it's a different in the number of crimes being committed. It's just a different in focus. If you have officers that are out continuously writing low-level marijuana tickets, they're not going to be in the right place to catch the carjacking suspect or catch the burglar. They're going to be doing stuff that really does not have an impact on the quality of life in the city. So that's kind of how we focus, refocus our deployment. And our arrests have gone down. So it's not a matter of, more arrests means less crime. It is not. We have less arrests and less crime. So it's all about, in my opinion, quality police services, that it has there's a meaning to what you're doing, not just doing it. Having grown up here in the city, I've seen different regimes with different philosophies. I've been stopped for no reason. I've been photographed just because this was a crime area. And I've also seen where police are really interactive. So I know the difference. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of how we approach, criminal enforcement. Because once you arrested somebody, you really branded them in a way that, I have less angst over arresting someone for a carjacking and giving and putting them in the criminal justice system, which I still think is broken. And I think that's another aspect that the task force, I don't even know is going to have the time to delve into, because there's just not enough rehabilitation from folks that get into the system.
So amen to that. But can I ask my last question so Michael can get in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the last question I had is, as you're sort of gathering this data, how are officers marking race, or how are they instructed to mark race? And I asked that question because we've seen in the past some police departments deliberately obscuring race, right? Where, they pull over somebody very obviously South Asian and they mark white in the box or something like that. And so what is your process, or how do your officers go about that? I'm assuming it's the race they perceive when they pull somebody over, but I don't know what that looks like from your perspective.
Normally, people self-identify. If we're talking about traffic citations, they're going to self-identify on their driver's license or ID by what race they choose. If they do not self-identify for arrest, we normally have an ID. If we don't, we ask them how they identify themselves. We allow them, they might identify as biracial, they might identify as African-American. And so normally, if we do not have something that states a race, like a Maryland ID card or driver's license that says African-American, you look at my ID, or something that's identifying like that, the officers will ask the individual, how do you identify yourself? And a lot of times they'll refuse. And if they refuse, you kind of have to give your best guess and so on. So there's not a perfect science, but by no means do our officers, are they encouraged to, or do they, fudge what the race is. It just is. It's number one, it's pointless. It's just, you must have a problem if you're trying to cover up a problem.
So thank you, Jimena. We'll take about 2-3 more. Michael and then Jide.
First, I would say thanks so much for all the data. I'm looking forward to digging into it a little bit. The quick questions I have is, was any analysis done of disaggregating officer data by race, age, or years of service, and gender versus the type of arrest statistics that they had also disaggregated by race, looking for potential implicit bias? Not to say that just differences there would be implicit bias, but I'm just wondering, because all that data is there, so you could do some comparison, and I'm wondering if the rates are similar between officers. That was my first question. The other question is just data that would still be really helpful would be getting data on all the calls for service that didn't lead to arrest, because just getting an idea of some quantification of what happens, what officers are doing, how much of their time is spent with those type of calls, both public initiated as well as officer initiated. So that's really was the two things I was most interested in.
Absolutely, we can get you our calls for service. That's easy to do. So I'll make sure I get that to the link team. Yeah, I mean, we just got this information. And we've only had it for a week or two, and we're still analyzing it. But obviously, any tool we can have, we're going to analyze internally, and if there are trends or patterns, we're going to look into what they are, and if they're a problem. I think it's hard to take the data here and immediately say that there's an implicit bias, because a person that's assigned to our special assignment team, which is our plainclothes team, may have more arrests than someone's that's in our patrol section. Same with the traffic data. A person that's assigned to our traffic unit is obviously going to have a lot more traffic citations than a person that's not. A person may be assigned to community service and not have any arrest or citation. So a lot of it is really, you got to really dig deep into the numbers. And the numbers are the numbers, but there's also a lot of underlying meaning and background on position and so on and so forth.
Thanks.
G-Day, I know you had some extra follow-up questions, and then we'll hit Dwayne, and then we'll turn it over to the city manager.
Actually, Jumana's question and the chief's response kind of wrapped it up. They were towards quotas, so thank you.
Thank you. Dwayne, I saw you had your hand raised. Do you still have a question?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the chief could respond but he may know. Is the data within the data? I mean, you pointed out that many of the majority of arrests occur in Ward 5 and 6. When it's around Ward 5 and 6, is that located majority in the commercial area? In wards, particularly in Ward 6, is that where the majority of those arrests take place, or is it dispersed more widely throughout Ward 6?
I don't know that we went that deep into the data. I found the analysis interesting on Ward 5 because I think they're 6% of our overall crime. Ward 6 is our largest ward with as far as percentage of crime. I think they're in 41% or so. So a lot of our crime is centered around our commercial district in the Langley Crossroads. So we'll try to take a deep dive into that. But right now we just have the ward information. We don't necessarily have is it all like for the traffic data. We could see specific intersections in which where someone was stopped. But it's something that if you're asking me, I definitely think there's a lot of focus on criminal activity along the Takoma Langley Crossroads area and New Hampshire Avenue. And we also have a lot of criminal activity around Flower Avenue and some of the businesses on Flower. But anytime we have information like this, we try to do a deep dive into it to figure out what the trends are, where do we need to deploy staff, do we need to work more intimately with the community groups there for whether it be crime prevention through environmental design, whether it be more patrols, and so on and so forth. I know we're working very closely with the high rises on New Hampshire Avenue. We had, the recent double homicide there. We had a lot of stuff from autos. So to me, I'm a data geek, and I think it's really important that if you have the data there, don't just let it sit on the shelf. Look at it, try to analyze it as much as you can. And I can tell you what Mr. Powers has presented as far as being able to move the data around, compare the data is beyond anything I could ever imagine to do, but it gives you that ability to be able to move the data around, think, okay, what was this and that. So I think you're going to enjoy diving into it. And for us as well, from a departmental perspective, we obviously want to learn from it.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Sorry, Dwayne. No, let's get one more in, and then as a reminder, this is not the only time we can ask Chief questions. We can take, let us know what you all need to dig into the data more, and we can always get the Chief to come back or answer some of those questions via email so you have a written response. So Adam, and then we'll turn it over to City Manager Ludlow.
Thanks, Jamal. I'll try to be quick. At the community listening session, there was a community member that raised an issue that I wasn't aware of, which is that the budget includes some sort of shift from like 6 operations positions to, I think, 6 investigative positions. And I think that fits with what you're discussing today about shifts in priority. So I wondered if you could just speak to that, unpack that, tell us what change, if any, is being made and why you think it's justified.
Yeah, Adam, unfortunately, that whole switch was not really portrayed the way it should have been. We had a number of vacancies within the police department that we did not staff our special assignment team, which is our undercover team, because our main focus is on patrol. Our budget sections shifted those positions to patrol because they were not filled. They should have stayed in investigations. So basically, now that we've become fully staffed, we've restaffed our special assignment team. So no positions have really moved around. They were never positions that were filled. So it created a lot of, I guess, conspiracy about we're making massive changes. We're really not. We've had the same structure. We just didn't have those vacancies filled, and they were just moved over to our operations section, and we were moving them back to where they should have. They should have just remained vacant in our investigation section and not moved over. So it really has nothing to do with our philosophy as far as trying to focus on more serious crime. It just, I explained this in detail at some of the budget sessions, and it's unfortunate that it was kind of portrayed as we're adding new positions. We really haven't changed.
Thank you, Chief. And Emil, I want to get to you. So we're going to get to Emil and keep the discussion open. So Emil, then we'll hand it over to Ludlow finally.
Thanks, Jamal. I just had a quick question. For the chief, did I interpret the data correctly that something like, I think it was 80% of the criminal arrests and 90% of the traffic arrests, or maybe it was the other way around, but I think it was 80% of the criminal arrests and 90% of the traffic arrests are not of Takoma, or people who are not Takoma Park residents. Is that correct?
I think it was 18 some odd % of the criminal arrests were of Takoma Park residents, and 8.4, if I remember correctly, were of the traffic arrests were of Takoma Park residents. So yeah, you had that correct.
Okay, thank you.
Adam, did we answer your question in the chat? I don't think we did yet, correct?
I think Kiminori answered it privately for me that the traffic arrests, I think, include any type of arrest that is that starts with a traffic stop. Is that right, Chief Dwell? Okay.
Perfect.
I just want to stress, I am available. I and my staff are available at any time. If you're looking through this data, if you have any questions, please reach out. I or one of my staff members will get back to you with an answer as quickly as we can. And we owe you, just so I'm understanding, you want all of our calls for service calendar year for last year, 5 years. It's in our annual report. It's easy to collect. So just tell me what you want.
Awesome. Thank you, Chief. And again, we'll forward any other questions folks have. Feel free to email them to myself, to the team. I will get them over. And then if we need to invite the chief back to further unpack some of that data, we can do that. Or if one of the subcommittees want to go deeper into that, we can do that as well. Or if we want to set aside a standalone meeting to focus on that, we can do that as well. And we'll have some of that discussion in the timeline discussion later. But without further ado, I want to hand it over to our City Manager Ludlow.
Thank you so much. So I've been given the request to go over the entire city budget in 10 minutes. For those of us who've been working on it since January, it's a big task, but I think I've tried to narrow down some of the key points that will be helpful. And if you can bring up my presentation, we'll go through it. I'm going to speed through this and only focus on a few slides. So, but I did want to have a little bit of a bigger presentation available to you so you could go back and look at it at another time. So next slide, please. Just a high level intro is that our budget is a maintenance of effort budget. There's very little change from past years. I had proposed a small tax increase. The council last night determined that there would not be a tax increase and went through the reconciliation process. It's a standard process that happens every year. One of the things that's a little bit of an outlier is that we have federal funds coming to us that we still need to know how to use. They will be used only for very limited things, but it's kind of this elephant in the room that it's a little bit unexplained. You'll see some references in this presentation. Next. This slide, basically our entire city budget, operating and capital, is 35 million bucks. That's a small division of a county office. So, you know, people think of us as a large government. We're very, very small, and it's amazing what we do on $35 million. Next. Oh, this particular budget, I worked really hard to ensure that it was very understandable because we're in a time of transition. I retired July 1. The council is in the interviewing process for a new city manager. We have a brand new library director. We have a brand new public works deputy director, and I have a vacant position in the housing and community development director position that we need to start interviewing for. Next. So a couple things that are important, I think, for you all, is if you want to dig into the budget, is that the proposed budget document is on our website under Finance Department under budget and financial documents. Please take time and look at it. It's really well done. Deputy City Manager Jessica Clark did a great job along with the Finance Director, Susan Chung. What I would suggest is that you start by reading my transmittal message, and then the staff has prepared a reader's guide to the budget book, which is really helpful. Just one of the things that people think of is that a budget is exactly what we're going to spend, and it's not. It's a conservative estimate of a plan for the budget, for the look ahead in terms of spending money. So for that reason, sometimes the numbers are a little bit bigger than actually get spent because we don't want to go in debt. But if you want to look at what we've actually spent, you look at the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, that is also on the website. Next. In Takoma Park, we get revenue from very restricted sources. Half of our budget comes from property taxes, from real property taxes, and a large proportion of that is single-family homeowners. We get about a quarter or a little bit more from intergovernmental funds. These are municipal tax duplication and other state aid. We get a small amount from income tax and a small amount from charges for services, like the amount that you would pay for a recreation program. Next. And if you look through my PowerPoint, you can see how each of these elements break down. Next. One of the things that is important is that in the past year, because of the pandemic, we didn't get as many charges for services. So we're using federal funds to replenish our revenue for rec classes and that kind of thing. Next. And as I mentioned, we have these federal funds coming. We get $14.8 million, which compared to a $35 million budget is huge. We get it in 2 tranches of $7.4 million. Hopefully the first money comes in June, and then a year later we get the next 7.4. Again, we're waiting to find out exactly how that money can be spent. Most of it cannot go to things like police or road repair or the things that we spend a lot of money on. Next. So when we look at our budget, we have about 178.5 full-time equivalents. It's about a little less than 200 staff people because we have part-time recreation staff. 78% of the general fund expenditures goes to pay per personnel. If you look at our budget document, we have position titles and pay ranges, so you can see what we pay. And we have 2 unions that represent most city staff. ASME represents about 80% of our staff, of our employees, mostly non-management. And United Food and Commercial Workers Local 400 represents police officers below the rank of sergeant. Both unions, we're in our first year of a 3-year collective bargaining agreement. We have annual reopeners for wage negotiations because money is so uncertain that we have to negotiate the wages each year. Next. I have a number of slides that show different departments. I'm not going to go into them much, but general government, that's city manager, the city council, the city clerk, legal services, IT, HR. Next. So the police department is one that, of course, you've been very interested in, and so I'll spend just a few minutes on the police department. You had the presentation early on in the task force about the different divisions of the police department. There's no increase in the number of staff for the police department for this next year. We had thought it was about a 7% increase of costs for the police department for personnel. We found an error in our document, so the number and percentages will be reduced. As we went through, we found that some of the higher pension costs were assigned to some of our administrative staff. And I'll go into that in a moment. So again, it's a maintenance of effort budget for FY22, and the actual non-personnel expenditures actually decreased by 5.5%. Next. In the police department, the vast majority of our expenses are personnel, much greater percentage than citywide. And there's a couple factors. One is we need to have competitive entry wages and benefits for our officers. And there's a lot of competition for the police officer positions. And our police officers participate in a Takoma Park police retirement plan. They contribute 7% of their salary to it, and the city contributes an actuarially determined amount, which is right now about 43% of their salary. So when you look through the budget, the amount that we pay for police officers is very high compared to how much the officers actually take home. Part of the reason for that high pension fee amount is that it's a small plan. It was relatively young. It was started in 2001. And so we have to put in a lot of money to keep it to be sound. We have our own plan for an interesting reason, and that is because the officers used to be in a state plan, but it did not pay for benefits to our officers who are LGBTQ officers. And in order for us to have the partners of our officers receive benefits at the time, it's way before same-sex marriage and everything, we started our own plan. It's a big lift for the city, but it was our commitment to those officers. One of the things that our plan does not do is it does not pay for retiree health care. That's very different than many other police departments. It keeps it affordable for the city of Takoma Park, but it is a competitive disadvantage when we're trying to recruit officers. Because we don't have retiree health care, we have to have other reasons for the officers, the good officers, to want to work for Takoma Park. One of the things that I like is that we have a variety of responsibilities, trainings. You can learn a lot of different kinds of tasks and skills in a full service department. You can do investigations, you can do traffic, you can do community service activities. So it's an opportunity to really be well-rounded. There's folks who want to work for Takoma Park because of the culture of our police department. And that's more so now than it has been. We have we look at what kind of promotional opportunities we have. Again, it helps that we have a variety of units within our police department. And we have take-home cars for our officers, which everybody else has, we have to have, so the officers qualify for take-home police cars. Next. One of the other important features about the police budget is that about half of the budget, half of the revenue for the police department comes from outside of the city of Takoma Park. We have a thing called the Takoma Park Police Rebate, which is from the 1940s. It's from when Takoma Park was partly in Montgomery County and partly in Prince George's County. Montgomery County has a special code provision that gives us money based on the assessable base of the city for the police department. Right now, we get about $1.2 million a year from that special county code police rebate. The municipal tax duplication police rebate, which is the one often you hear about, is the in lieu of police rebate. It's supposed to be an equivalent amount to the amount. I'm sorry. Hi. It's supposed to be an equivalent amount to the amount Montgomery County would spend if they were in charge of full service policing. And I actually worked on the formula for this in 1998. The formula that was developed was approved in 2000, but even then it was out of date. It was only based on calls for service. And that's not the way we like to do policing. We like to do community outreach and other kind of work. The formula was functional up until fiscal year 2012, at which point the Montgomery County froze all the in lieu of payments because they were going through recession and they kept our money. And if you've been following along my work with the county, we may actually start getting it back. So one of the things that I hope to share with everybody is to please push the county council to approve the Government Operations Committee recommendation to get more tax duplication money to Montgomery County municipalities. They should be voting on that next week, and hopefully we may actually get another $480,000 in Takoma Park in this year. One of the key pieces would be that not for this year, but for next year, an opportunity to redefine how we would get compensated for police rebate and what that formula is. I would like to see it really talk about the kinds of things that you're looking at in terms of reimagining public safety. What does it mean for partnering and getting mental health services? What does it mean for a variety of different things that are different than just responding to a call for service? So that's going to be, I think, an exciting possibility of really quantifying the benefit of that model of public safety. We also get a small amount of money from the state of Maryland for police aid, about $450,000. It's a form we fill out. How many officers do we have? How much square footage do we have in a police department? And a few things like that. Next. So then we do have a speed camera division within our police department. It employs 3 of our staff work for it. They get money from the speed camera fines, but they also, we spend the money on anything that's public service, public safety related. And one of our officers that's actually paid through the speed camera funds does a lot of the work about checking traffic safety and that kind of thing. So it's try to put a nexus there. Okay, so we'll be going through things relatively quickly now. Next slide, please. Obviously, we have a public works department, and we had Daryl Braithwaite talk a little bit about that previously. Next. They do stormwater management. Next. We have a recreation department. This is where a lot of coordination with on public safety comes from and how we do public service. Next. We have the Housing and Community Development Department, which you've heard a lot about. Next. We have a communications unit that's different than the police communications. This does a lot of our social media, website updates for the city. One very exciting thing is the council has approved a second person to be in our communications staff. So we won't just have one person doing all of our media and website work, but we will actually have another full-time person starting in FY22. Next. We have a library. Next. We also have a non-departmental account, which is for things that can't really be attributed to a particular department. It includes payments for workers' compensation and other insurance. And one of the things when you have a police department and you have a public works department, you have accidents, you try to make sure that the people are safe, but so arranging so that our staff are safe also means that our payments are less. So that's important. We have also funds for a lot of grants, and we have a lot of ways to try to help residents with their property taxes and other kinds of community partnership programs. Next. One of the things that was a little different this year was I put a batch of money in the budget, in the proposed budget, so that the council could try to identify how to pick some things that weren't the base budget that they really wanted to spend on to advance their priorities. And if you watch the reconciliation discussion from last night, you'll see that they put money towards a variety of services. Next. We do have a capital budget. There are some items that go to the police department and other departments. One of the things that we have in Takoma Park is called an equipment replacement reserve, because we're a small city, and if you buy a really big truck, it can throw your budget all out of whack. So what we do is we spread out the payments for vehicles and equipment that we have to replace over time and pay a portion of it every year, so that we don't have wide variations in the amount that we put out for purchases of our equipment. This, in the coming year, we'll be purchasing, replacing 5 police vehicles, and as well as some other equipment for the police department. We have some pretty big equipment for our public works department to do. And then we also in our capital budget do the kinds of things like new sidewalks and traffic calming designs and installations, all of which can be really helpful in making a community safer. And I think next, please. The rest of the slides I won't go through, but they identify the different council priorities and how all of the various elements of the budget help advance them. So what you can do is you can look through it, you can answer, follow up with me if you've got questions. But this is the abridged version of the Takoma Park budget. Happy to answer any questions that you have. How'd I do on time, by the way? All right.
You did great considering the amount of information that you just unloaded on everyone. We are already running up against time, but we do have the city manager here. So maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience, that'd be great.
After how many years can Takoma Park police officers retire? 25 years is the time period.
The second part was the percentage of their salary.
50%.
It's 60%, I think.
I thought it was 25 at 50 and they're based on their top 3 years of salary.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, we also have, as part of that, we also have disability, obviously, if there's a need for that.
Mm-hmm. One more question.
I was so thorough.
It was incredible.
If you have any questions, please send me an email or ask some other way. I'm happy to answer it. Thanks, everybody.
I actually have a quick question.
Oh, now Councilmember Sarah, she's like, oh, I didn't know this. We just finished the budget.
Okay, G-Day and then the councilwoman. Go ahead, G-Day.
Has anybody ever done any projections on kind of that health services aspect that we kind of talk around? Have there ever been any budget projections or any review that's been done on what the potential cost would be?
For mental health or for, yes. We have looked a little bit at that. We're actually hoping to get that from the county or from some partnership from Adventist Healthcare. One of the things that's important in the federal funds that are coming out is a lot of funding source for mental health services. That's only through December of 2024. But it could make a really good pilot project to get us going and to know what's really should be involved.
Okay, good to know.
Great. Councilwoman.
Real quick. So I don't know if folks have had a chance to listen to the discussion, the reconciliation discussion last night. But the discussion of the K9 unit was one that I really think, and we can send the link out, is going to be really important for you all to listen to. Because it raised other issues regarding the use of K9 in the city that would be helpful to hear you all's insight in terms of what are the policy implications that would lie before the city in terms of the elimination of the K9 unit.
Right, and I can speak to that very briefly. The actual budget amount of not having our 1 K9 unit is less than $11,000. So it's not a large quantity. It's more what are the policies that go into it. It also raised real questions about how sometimes it seems easy to just knock something off the list. Okay, we'll get rid of K9. But recognizing that there are these policy issues, how does that affect other officers coming from other jurisdictions into our area? And it also goes to one of the points we didn't mention last night, council member, which is that sometimes having these specialty units is a attraction and retention portion for our officers too. And so we just have to always think about all of the implications and then have the good recommendation to the council for a decision moving forward.
Yeah. But we can make sure that we kind of timestamp, because those meetings, they go long. And we'll timestamp the segment of the discussion that I think would be helpful, particularly for those who are working on the jurisdictional issues or the cross-jurisdictional issues, as well as any special units, that subgroup that's working on that.
And fortunately, most of the police discussion last night was at the beginning of the meeting.
Great.
So I did want to answer very quickly one of the questions in the box. It's called the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, which is the federal funds that just got passed by Congress recently. And there's a variety of titles within that act that have to do with mental health.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to turn the floor over to my colleague, Michael Aiken.
Excellent. And I'm aware that we have 4 minutes left, and that's not enough for a timeline discussion. So we will absolutely make this the focus of our steering committee meeting next Tuesday, but a couple parameters around this. We've got basically 5 meetings left on the calendar. We've got 3 more task force meetings and 2 more steering committee meetings. That is a lot of time. We also know that that's going to creep up on us very quickly. So there's been some email traffic around, is that too short of a time? Are we rushing this? I think a request that went out last week around what are your recommendations probably played into that feeling, and it shouldn't have. And I apologize for the way that email was worded. What we're trying to do in the currently allotted time is make sure we're allotting subject matter experts and the deep amount of data that's being thrown at you in a way that makes sense for the calendar going forward. So we've had requests for the victims and witness coordinator. Would love some feedback on, is that a specific subcommittee that would like to talk to this person, or would the full task force like to do that? Same thing for mental health experts, same thing for all of the other subject matter experts we have coming together. There are lots of different ways we can proceed. We could decide we want to add a second weekly meeting every week. We could decide that we want to extend the timeline a bit, assuming that that works for the council and the mayor. There are a lot of different things we could do, but I also want to let you know that I think from a what were we charged to do, we can get through most of that in the next 5 weeks if we're really deliberate about what we do as a full group and what we do as breakout groups, and what level of interaction on homework is reasonable to expect from a citizen-led panel. Just the data we presented to you tonight is going to take hours to pour through in any sort of way that's going to allow for really good and robust questions. So it's not fair to throw that into a meeting and then ask for feedback the next time we get together. That may not work. So we'd really like feedback on what would work. Would you like some more time to digest between meetings? Would it be helpful to add in more speakers or less speakers? And then on the actual recommendations piece, we were not asking you to draft a report at this point. We were asking that based on what you've heard in kind of the first half of this process, if there are things that are starting to formulate recommendations in your mind, it's really helpful to start getting those out so we can make sure we're providing the expertise that's needed to turn those into actual recommendations. So we heard a lot at the public meeting around what are the non-emergency responses to police calls. That seems like it's something every subcommittee is talking about. It would surprise me if there wasn't a recommendation around that. So if we know that, let's start listing out that we will probably have a recommendation around that. What level of expertise do we need to bring in to really refine that? Those are the things we were trying to capture, or those things that must be in there based on what you've heard so far, with a full understanding that's a lot more we need to talk about. So I understand where we are near the end of our time, but does anyone have any thoughts about any of that they want to at least put on the table for us to come back to at our next steering committee meeting?
What exactly does more time to digest mean? Does that mean getting the data prior to, like, well in advance of the meetings, or are you saying spacing the meetings out? Like, what exactly does that mean?
It could be either. My opinion would be that if you just got the data without the chief's background and without kind of an explanation on how to use it, it probably wouldn't have been that useful. So you almost needed to have someone walk through the data sets before you could dig in, but then you didn't have any real-time questions because you were just getting the data for the first time. So should we be setting it up where you get presentations one meeting and then the Q&A really comes the next meeting when you've had time to digest it? That's more of what we're looking at. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense.
Perfect. Michael, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess my initial reaction is, given that the budget's already getting passed, it's not going to be tied to FY22 immediately what we're doing. And we're just starting to get some of the information. I mean, like we were talking about dispatch, we've seen no dispatch data yet. I really feel like we should be pushing to try to extend the timeline if fellow task force members are willing to do that. I also think it came up early on in talking about getting community impact. I would like to have some, Zoom meetings or other meetings with people in my ward and try to like hear from my neighbors. I haven't had a chance to do that yet. So I feel like, you know, and this may be a difference between the task force's timeline and Link's timeline right now, given what agreement is in place with the city. But I think that can be adapted if people are willing. And I think, you know, there's no reason in my mind that we shouldn't think about going through the summer with this and at the end of the summer issuing a report rather than trying to crank something out June 1st. That's just, you know, me, but I know that we had a little email exchange that I think a number of people felt that we were kind of being pushed for time. And I think there's a lot more we could do. And if we want to make real substantive change, I think you want real good recommendations and a real strong report. So having a little bit more time and thought would be helpful.
Thank you, Michael. And that kind of dovetails. I'm seeing Christina's comments here that, you know, I don't mind being asked for recommendations, but there are 100 pages of data that we've been sent, and working through that in some sort of real time, it is difficult. And we're certainly open to that. Council member, I don't know if there's anything that would be helpful from your perspective on the timeline. I know June was specifically asked for initially. So is there any guidance that would be helpful for us around any of that?
Yeah, so I am open to the possibility of extending the timeline for you all. One of the things that we did discuss during the council reconciliation meeting last night, oh my God, it was just last night, was the possibility of allocating resources around the public safety task force. So there's recommendations or things that you all might need. So there's an opportunity for extension. One thing that I would like to encourage us to do, so the city manager didn't have a lot of time to talk about ARPA, but that might create another opportunity for budgetary decisions that will need to be made relatively quickly. So for me, it would be great if we could have at least some aspects of recommendations in July. And that way, you know, your recommendations could be used to inform decisions that might be made around the money that we might get for ARPA, which could include things like mental health services and things like that. So while, Michael, you're right, the budget has been made, but the ARPA fund decisions have not been.
Thank you, Councilmember Ajno.
I think that's really helpful, Councilwoman. And I think that probably, you know, this might be my sort of type A lawyer mind speaking, but I think that it would be useful if we started maybe with an end date of what we were trying to accomplish by when, and then worked backwards, so that I think that part of the issue with the deadline was that it sort of, it felt perhaps wrongly so on my part that it was sort of came out of thin air. And so I think if we understood how it fit into the larger pattern and what we needed to accomplish by when, then we could sort of agree on some set dates. Then we could make sure that we have enough time implemented or set in for each part of the process. So I think some larger understanding of the overall end date that we're working towards and what each piece of the process looks like would allow us to sort of prioritize and make sure that everything's done in a timely manner. And I apologize if that's been distributed and I just missed it.
No, thank you so much for that. Here's what I'm going to recommend. I know we're at time. What I'd love to do is, I'm kind of looking for some general agreement here. We have a lot of subject matter experts that everyone has requested that we need to start slotting in. We also need time for this group just to start talking through recommendations and what they don't have yet. So for next week's subcommittee meeting, we'll still try and get a subject matter expert or two into that meeting, but I'd like to keep a large part of that meeting for our subcommittees to really dig in. What do you have? What do you need? Start refining some of this, talking about the timeline so that we're not so rushed through that. Does that sound like a good use of Tuesday night for us? Looking for some general feedback on that? Or do you feel like you've got that and you really want to start getting these SMEs in there in larger numbers? Because we're getting somewhat conflicting feedback on that. So feel free to just let us know as we prepare for next week. We are going to preserve a good amount of time for the groups to come together and really start. I'll say two quick things as we wrap up. It is helpful in our experience of leading these types of dialogues to have some sort of deadline that isn't open-ended. What happens at some point is the task forces start to lose members, and then it becomes a question of, are we adding new members, et cetera? And so there's something powerful about a group of people coming together for a dedicated amount of time. The other thing that we've seen work really well is an actual recommendation around this not being the only time recommendations are made. So really thinking through, this is the start of something. What is that? And what does a recommendation around that look like? Can be another helpful way of time limiting it, but not limiting the scope of what we're able to do. Christina, I'll go to you for the last question or thought.
I was just gonna say that the recommendations conversation I'd like to have in my small group first, and then come to the large group with it. So if you're asking us for recommendations before we meet with our small group, like I'd like to go there and brainstorm with them so that there's some alignment before then we bring it to the steering committee. But that's a process thing that seems logical to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we'll use that guidance for our Tuesday meeting as well. Excellent. So to close this out today, we got a lot of information coming your way. You've got the Chief's data set. We'll send the presentation. We'll send Susie's presentation. You've got all of the feedback from the community meeting, etc. So as you start to go through that, please feel free to ask follow-up questions in real time. Send those in to our facilitators. We'll get the answer and circulate them back out to the task force as rapidly as we can. Sound good? Excellent. Productive meeting all. Have a great evening, and we'll get you information ASAP. Thank you.